There you are. How are you, man?
Good, man. How you doing?
Good. I can't see you yet, but I
Oh,
can hear
okay.
you.
There's a button I can push to make that happen. Uh,
Oh, there. Look at the studio too, buddy. Holy, I remember when that was a garage.
it was full of squirrels and mice and all kinds of horrible things, and now it's this. So,
It looks amazing. So,
yeah, we
it's
had,
funny because I was like, you know what? The first question I wanted to ask is how you kept yourself busy during the pandemic. And now I'm like, okay, maybe this was it.
yeah, we had, the Hello Darlings. You know any of them?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're
Yeah, we
great.
had them in here on Saturday night, kind of the last night of the tour. So it's a little sparse in here right now because we had the band set up and had chairs and all that stuff in here. So,
Were they playing a show?
yeah, yeah, they had a night off before they were flying home, so we had like 40 people in here, had a big feed, and had them play in here. It was a blast.
I bet it, and it must sound wicked.
It does feel pretty good. It's still pretty lively. Like we got it
Yeah.
padded up pretty good, but it still has enough so it has its own vibe kind of thing. So,
Well, it's nice to hear it actually on the new record. You can hear it. You can hear
yeah,
that liveliness. You can hear the wood in the room. You know what I mean? It's definitely not a dead sound at all.
yeah, no, no, it's got still lots of vibe and it's fun. Like we've had the band in here and it feels great. So, yeah.
Crazy.
How you
Great to
doing? What's
see you,
going on?
man. Great to
Good,
see
man.
you.
What's going on?
Well, just settle. This is my spot. This is my spot in Fredericton now, downtown Fredericton. Got a little
Right,
studio on the go.
wicked. I woke
Yeah,
up this morning. I was like, "What should I wear?"
you nailed it,
I knew,
buddy.
I knew you'd, I knew you'd do it up, and I was like, "Doesn't matter what I want to wear. I only have three options anyway, so I'll just have to put on one of those shirts." I went with
One of the shirts, one of the fancy shirts. It's great, man. Well, I've been thinking about you a lot during this last couple of years because I don't know anybody, honestly, anybody. Maybe Alan Doyle, but I don't think so, who tours as much as you do. And so when I saw the shows kind of stop for everybody, including myself and everybody, I wondered, I was like, okay. Because it's funny because you and I you started kind of just before me, but really, it's weird to think that we've been doing this now for like 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I was realizing I'm telling people like they're saying, "When did you do this gig? When did you do this?" It's like, "Oh, that was 15 years ago." It's like, "Holy cow, 15 years ago." And there was years before that that I played places. So it's just, we're at that point now where we're the old guys now, Dave. Like we're
It
creeping up. We've switched over. We're not the young new guys anymore.
No, we switched over. I think we switched over, man. I saw a poster for a gig that said 2005, and I was like, oh yeah, man, that was like yesterday. And then it's like, wait, that's 17 years ago. And Al played on that gig with me. I'm like, 17 years ago.
Yeah, used to tell people I'm playing guitar for 10 years, and it felt like I said that for a long time. But now we're like, nope, I've been playing guitar for 23 years now. Gotta catch up and let people, tell the truth, I guess.
Totally. So how did it feel? I mean, like that's what I always I mean, so many of these conversations is about, how that obviously how the pandemic has affected people, but I've been so curious, particularly for you, who not only did you make records, but touring was your bread and butter. That's really where it all happened. It's where the fans were built, where the business was built. Everything was built off that amazing live show. And you had dates that were obviously canceled. You were probably in the middle of some sort of run, were you?
Absolutely. Yeah, we just had pretty much our biggest year ever. The year before that, we did probably, I don't know, it was 220 dates or something like that. Like it was just massive. And we were kind of getting all geared up to go off this big tour we had with Marty Stewart and Steve Miller through the States, go back to all those places. Had a bunch of new festivals lined up, all kinds of different things. And it was just, like we all went through, one day you're a musician, next day you're nothing. We pretty much, it just stopped suddenly. So it was a big adjustment just getting used to not being on the move. I'd be awake until 8 o'clock in the morning sometimes. I think my body just wasn't used to being rested. It's kind of weird.
Well, that's what I wondered. I wondered, like the day to day. It is so different to go from a schedule.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like every day on tour has an end,
It
has
was
a
actually it was
goal.
weird to go from no schedule because my body's so used to being, and me too, just a constant flux. Some days you're up at 9 a.m. to do a 6 hour drive. Some days you can stay in the same hotel till 4 p.m. before you go do sound check, and sometimes you got to drive after the gig, sometimes you don't. So in different time zones. So I was really used to that flux, and I was just I like that. I like the energy I get from being constantly switched around. So going from that to being like going to bed at a usual time, my body is just like I didn't mind it psychologically. I'm just like I don't want to go to bed at 9 o'clock. I
Right? You're
don't
like, I
want
got to
to do
change
that.
time zones. Can we just
That's just
pretend
right.
I'm in California tonight? Wow. And so, what were some of the things that you did? What were some of the? How did you kind of get through it?
I took on full cooking responsibility. That was definitely something that made me sane. There's no way I could wait for Lynn to get home and make supper while I was doing nothing all day. I
Yeah.
figured there's no way I could do that. So that was a big part of it. I got into that big and just, I really just enjoyed being home. I hadn't seen a summer for a long time, hadn't seen the lilacs change. I know that sounds like an old guy thing, but just those little bits of things that you don't really get to enjoy. And then the studio, this was a big thing. It started out as just a little reno job to kind of have a space to work in, and it turned into something much bigger. But I'm thrilled to have it. I've done the album out here, and just it definitely helped give me something to focus on when it was ready.
It's weird too, eh? Because it's probably something that wouldn't happen otherwise, right? Like, when were you going to be given that time to just have time off to get
Pretty
into something
much.
like
I
that?
mean, I'm not much of a carpenter. I was good for demo, but other than that, I didn't really do too much. But if we had that first, it was like when it first happened, I already thought we are gonna have 2 weeks off. It's like, okay, it's a good chance to start. I can help out, get things rolling, and then it just kept, turned into 2 years. But it was probably about a year to get the whole thing done, because the pandemic kind of slowed every kind of work down, including the guys working here. But yeah, I mean, having it now is just amazing. So it's I get to come over here and do this. Just
Totally. And you, so
I don't
you
even have
found
pants
you,
on. I've just got my shorts on. It's
yeah,
great. I
that's right. You
come
don't need it. You
over
don't
here.
need pants. This
I'm
is a
just
pants
business from the
free
top up. Everything else
pants.
is still.
That's been yeah, I feel you, man. I feel you. That's been the last couple of years. But you found a domestic rhythm then. You did eventually find a rhythm that worked for you being home.
Yeah, we both kind of took a little while getting used to being around each other. Usually, I've got that that bit of solitude at the end of every day where I go into a hotel room for 12 hours and don't see anybody. So it took me a long time to get used to having somebody within arm's reach all the time.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
yeah.
was definitely an adjustment. And my morning routine is often I can wake up and not talking to anybody until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Where Lynn wakes up and she's ready to go first thing. So that was a little bit of a rub at first, but we figured that out too. So yeah, it was all good. You just kind of settle into a different headspace. And once I let go of the fact that I wouldn't be working for a while and stopped worrying about that, it just became a lot easier on the head. I think just not having.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. I remember I was just talking about this. My brother, who I think you've met, one of my brothers, Jeremy, he's a doctor out in Calgary.
Yeah.
And he called me really like that first weekend. He called me on like Sunday of the pandemic, like right when it was still looking like 2 weeks. And he was like, and he works at a big hospital out west. So they were a bit more advanced. And he was like, this isn't going to be 2 weeks.
Yeah.
This is going to be 2 years. And I was like, no, but at the same time, I was kind of grateful because I know that in my mind, I was like, okay, well, we'll be back at this in a little
Yeah.
while, but
Yeah, I never would have given myself this much time off ever,
yeah,
have this much time to just not worry about it. And at first I was really caught up in the fact that I wasn't writing for a while. Then once I accepted that, hey, you don't need to write, you can just live. So once I got over that little hump, it was way easier. I just enjoyed being home. If I felt like music, I did music, but I probably didn't touch a guitar for like 7 or 8 months. I don't think. Hardly at all.
wow.
Yeah.
Were you singing?
A little bit. I did a couple things online, or if somebody wanted a video done for something, but no, it was pretty minimal. I wasn't feeling the creative thing at all. Not until we started to get ready to record, and I got back into writing. But yeah, for a long time, I just barely touched the guitar. Didn't even think about it, which was kind of that was good. I went back at it when I finally did get to play again. It was like almost like it felt like when I was 17 going at it
Yeah,
again.
yeah. I've heard that. I've heard that from a number of people, man. I heard that from a number of people who went through that same kind of thing where, I mean, I think again, it's that direction to the day, but also just how we define productivity. You know what I mean? All of a sudden it's like, wait, what's the meaning of what's my purpose if I can't be like productive in the way I've been productive? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
tricky to redefine those kind of things.
it was pretty tough at first. I was beating myself up because I was like, I'm never gonna have this time to create again. I should just dive right into it, get all this kind of stuff done. And then I ran into Catherine McClellan over in PEI at a gig, and I was like, Catherine, have you been writing? She's like, no. I was like, oh, awesome, good.
Yeah.
Somebody else who I thought, I look at as like, a writer, a full on, like that's her thing, And when she said she hadn't been, I was like, oh man, I'm so happy somebody else had, because everybody else was just cranking out all these videos and all this work, and I was like, where's my head at? But it was I just like my head just kind of thought it was a good chance to take a break from all of it and not worry about it.
Yeah, that's it. Permission to chill.
Yeah,
It's just weird to actually take so long to give yourself that permission. You know what I mean? Like there's a whole like it was very difficult. And the other thing is some of us we weren't even really putting into our minds how much was actually going on in our heads
right. Yeah,
when you're like is my career over? Like, is this it? You know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of that. You know what I mean? Like, what's it going to look like when we come back?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that definitely went through my head a lot too. It's I was fortunate enough to be in a position that I wasn't freaked out about not working for a little bit. As that stretched on, I definitely changed, thoughts on that. But it was yeah, it was just a weird headspace to be in, thinking about where you're gonna be at and how things are gonna come back. Everybody's like, oh, everybody's gonna be back and want all the gigs. It's like, yeah, but every musician's gonna be playing, everybody's gonna be fighting for the same space again. And it's all been yeah, it's coming back the way I thought it would. It's been more of an ease into it than it has been a full on every schedule full all the time. I'm sure some people are like that, but it just kind of seems like everybody wants to work, so let's all just take a little piece instead of a whole piece.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And so you've just gotten back from being out. How was it? How did it feel to be out
Oh,
on the road, man?
the best. I was afraid it was going to be a little time to get used to being on the stage again. I hadn't talked to a room full of people for a long time. Biggest conversation I had was two or three people. So going back to talking to 700 sitting in front of you, listening to you I thought it might freak me out, but it was honestly, man, the second I stepped on stage, it was like I hadn't left it. It just felt like the whole 2 years was just a blip in my head as soon as I get on stage, which was so great, so refreshing, so good to get back out there and just do what you do and know you still have it. Know that I
Isn't it a
hadn't lost,
relief?
know that I hadn't lost it over the last couple of
Yes,
years.
man.
Yeah,
It's
no,
such a relief. I think that's part of the reason it's so scary during that time because you're like, not only I just want to make sure I can still do it when the opportunity presents itself. And so to
well,
get in front of that audience and know you knew what to do.
it's a massive part of our lives for me, for sure. Like all of us, out touring and playing and performing. It's when you take that away, I kind of realized there wasn't a whole lot else that I was really doing that was all that productive or and really affected other people. So it was just like a massive chunk of you gone. So you kind of had to find a new identity, and I just wasn't sure how I was going to go back to being the old me, I guess you would want to
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
It felt yeah, it felt great. It was amazing. I missed all the shitty things too. Hotel rooms. I got excited when I had my first gas station sandwich out of a microwave. All that kind of stuff that really is horrible, but it's just like, oh, I guess I don't know. It's just you miss the imperfections as much as the perfect part of it.
Yeah, good to be home. That's what we always say when we're traveling. When we're back in the hotel. You're like, good to be home. It's like the
Oh, totally.
weirdest things where it feels kind of like the rhythm of at least a very important rhythm of your life when you're doing these things. As you said, that became quite annoying. Can be quite annoying. Waiting in line and for an airplane or whatever. All of a sudden, you do it after 2 years, and you're kind of like, that doesn't feel that bad.
No, and even going through the airport, I was like, oh man, I haven't done this for so long, and it was just like I never had, it's like I've been going to an airport every day. I went through, I remembered all the right things to take out of your bag. Went through. It was just,
Right.
I kind of had in my head like I'm gonna have to relearn my life again. But it was, no, it was just like getting back on the bike after
It was all right there. And
after
so,
the
do you
wreck.
guys? What your first trip was the Christmas trip? Was that the Christmas tour? Was the first?
Yeah,
And that was a full band experience, right? Like that
yeah,
was
that
a
was me and a couple guests kind of thing, and which was great. But again, that one got cut short. We had a couple cancellations on that one. So this is the first tour we just had this past May or March that nothing was canceled, that everything went ahead as planned, and all these gigs were booked 2 years ago. So it kind of felt like it actually
oh,
felt like a good stamp to like, okay, things have shifted from pandemic mode to post-pandemic mode. Whether that's me being a little cocky and thinking that it's all over. Not that it's all over, but that we're moving on anyway. So it was really cool. I mean, a lot of people held on to their tickets for like 2 years.
amazing.
And the rooms were pretty well full. So it was just yeah, it kind of felt like we stepped away from the pandemic. Getting back into those rooms and finally doing those gigs.
Yeah, 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 for sure. That's amazing. And you were solo. You were. I mean, you had Dave. Dave was
Yeah.
opening, but you were both. You guys were doing your solo sets, right? You were doing. That's pretty amazing to be back on the stage doing a solo set because it's all on you at that point.
Yeah, I'm most comfortable doing that anyway. I love the band stuff, but the band stuff is kind of sporadic for the most part. So I don't know if I'd want to run into a band gig right away. It was actually pretty great to just go out with my guitar, knowing everything was on me. I'm more comfortable knowing that I'm the only one who can screw up.
Right. I
My
wondered
guitar.
that. Well, it's. I mean, it's a great show too, and you've done it so many times. You know what I mean? Like you've. It's not like you're not used to being solo.
Yeah, no,
You can. You know
yeah,
you
that
can
felt the
carry the
most
show,
comfortable.
and
Yeah, yeah.
I felt like it. And I feel like the energy in the rooms now are different. They're different than they were in December, and they're different than they were a year ago. I did some shows a year ago, like kind of even almost right in the middle of the pandemic,
Mm,
where it was all spaced apart and
right, yeah.
very small shows, and it was really fun and kind of moving because of the effort people were putting into actually being together. But there's now it feels a little bit more. Nor, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It feels like there's a bit more spirit in the air, which is good, nice.
I guess I found like when you were doing like half capacity rooms, everybody was still very aware of what was going on.
Yeah,
You knew you weren't sitting next to somebody else because you weren't allowed to,
yeah,
because it wasn't safe to, whatever the reasons were. And this last run, there was none of that. None of the gigs were socially distanced. So if the room, we had one gig that we were four short of a sellout, so we had like 760 people in a room, all sitting beside each other. The vibe of that room was amazing.
yeah, right.
But people kind of had a little more, and I think at that point Ontario had switched from mask to no mask, so it was just again to another step towards, kind of back to what people have been wanting to do for so long. Go to a show and just sit down, and enjoy it, and not worry about what was going on outside the
Yeah,
doors,
right.
and no reminders of it.
And you're feeling that on stage.
Oh man, people were. It was so positive. People were just so pumped to be back out listening to music, and they've been hanging, like I said, hanging on to tickets for 2 years. So it was almost like a reunion with a bunch of people you don't know. I don't know how to explain that.
It's so beautiful. We talk about the power of live music, and it's what drew us to it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like we knew, like you knew it when you were 17 that what you were doing on stage was doing something to people who were watching that you wanted to be part of, that you felt like you were, you know what I mean? You were giving something of yourself, as you said, like giving something of yourself to people. It's like, okay, this works. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm playing a role in the world. You know what I mean? And sometimes I think we take that for granted. We kind of forget that there is this like real communal experience that happens at live music shows.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought of music as it's a strange thing as far as like where people go to attend live. If you go to a basketball game or something like that, there's always an us versus them for sure, right? It's one team versus the other team. You always see a winner and a loser. But music, when you show up, it's everybody's a winner. Everybody's on the same side. Everybody wants to see you to do great. They want you to rock their face off. They want you to do whatever you do, and you want to do it for them. So it's just everybody's kind of like got this collective energy to having a great night, which is it doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's the absolute best thing. And you can't. I was fortunate this run. There wasn't one gig that I was like walked away thinking, "Oh man, I hope I don't have to do that again." Everything felt good, and just the vibe in the room. I guess I can't get over how happy it was, how happy I was, and how fulfilling it was, and how much it just felt like, oh man, I'm still useful.
And so, you really do. You move people so deeply. You move people. I've seen it. I watch it. I love it. It's like that's why I'm such a fan. I love watching your shows. I love hearing your voice, and it resonates with people in a very deep place. But I think what you said is really important, because this idea of like they want you to do well.
Mhm.
They don't want it. They don't want it. They don't want to. And so there's a real, and you want them to have a good time. That's a really great way to look at it. It's a great way to look at it. It's like you're in this together for this moment of time. And I think when you're starting out as a performer, everybody's so scared of messing up.
Yeah, and it was, I can't remember who said it to me, but it was like we got to talk about hecklers, and shutting them down, and there's always graceful ways to do it and not, and I've lost a little bit of my grace with that, because I've realized that everybody else in the room wants them to shut up too, not just me. So it's like we're all working toward just one goal. If you don't want to be part of it, that's cool, but let everybody else do their thing. So that kind of knocked off a little bit of like trying to be polite or pushing through somebody, that kind of thing. Now it's just like, if you don't want to be here, leave. Like, you're not doing anybody any favors. So but just
Yeah,
kind of
everybody's
that
there
off
for
a
a
little
reason.
bit. But everybody's there for the same thing. Like, everybody wants the show to be great. Nobody goes to a show wanting to see you fall on your face. That's not what they're there for. They want to go and they want to leave thinking they had a moment. And that's what you try to provide.
When did you get like? I've always wondered about the early days. Like, let's go back to the beginning for a little bit. When did you? I mean, you grew up in rural New Brunswick.
Yep.
When was it? Like, who were you listening to? Who were your parents listening to at home? When did your guitar fall into your lap? When did all that stuff happen?
Guitar was, I mean, late for some, early for me, I guess. I was about 14, I think, when I got my first guitar from mom and dad. I played in band music programs. I played tuba, was my first instrument.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I played trumpet some. I played bass, played drums, kind of whatever hole I could fill, my band director would throw me into. And mom and dad were a lot of gospel, like, a lot of country gospel kind of stuff. My brothers, whatever they had, lots of, I don't know, Warrant and, Wasp and that kind of stuff, Stripe or whatever. I had all these
Sounds
great.
like I remember getting Warrant cherry pie, like literally from my brothers from the Fredericton Mall. Remember, it's so funny that you've mentioned that, because it's just exactly like. Now, where do you fit in the family? How many brothers do you have?
So two older brothers. I'm the
Yeah.
youngest
Okay.
by 7 and 8 years.
Okay.
So I wouldn't, I was a surprise. I feel like, but well, I showed up
A
and
miracle.
a miracle.
Come
That's
on.
a way better way to put
Don't
it.
sell yourself short.
But yeah, so it was just kind of rural New Brunswick. So you're at the mercy of whatever's on the radio, and I just kind of took it all in. I was pretty fortunate to have a musical family. Mom plays. Our grandfather played fiddle, so there was always music around. So that kind of got my love for music going. And then I realized after a while, tuba is really it's fun to play in the band, but you don't take a tuba to a party, right? Nobody wants to sit down and jam out with the tuba. So that's when I grabbed the guitar. That's when I just kind of started getting into that and learned by myself, mostly self-taught. I had a couple cousins that definitely helped me along the way, and yeah, I just played along with the stereo. That was me as a kid. I put my headphones on and play and just do that for hours.
Wow. And but were you singing much before that?
Yeah, I always sang as a kid, but it was always kind of more of a thing I had to be forced into.
Wow.
And then, yeah, I guess I didn't really, I did cover stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
So I really had my own voice. I was doing Hooting the Blowfish and, whatever else was on the radio kind of thing. But
I mean, did
yeah,
people give you a sense that did you have a sense that you could sing?
um, not really, because just kind of something everybody did.
Yeah, right.
Wasn't like I wasn't like a standout in the family. Everybody sang. My mom sang, my aunt sang, and there was always music around. So it was more just something everybody did. It wasn't. And my grandfather played music his whole life, never took a dime for it. So music wasn't put on this pedestal of like, oh, you're a musician. It was more like, okay, great, you play, but go to work on Monday morning. there was there
Yeah,
was
right.
no it wasn't this mystic thing, I guess. So yeah, it wasn't something I even ever thought about was being a musician. It was always just loved music.
Wow. It's crazy to me. It's crazy to me that like the first time you opened your voice, everybody didn't just go, "What the heck?" You know what I mean? Just because you do have such a unique instrument. Was that something that you felt like really then got developed over time? You started to find your voice over time, find the kind of the power of it, or like the kind of multiple gears that you had access to.
Yeah, I mean, once I started playing quite a bit in the bars, I guess I kind of started to realize that not everybody does what I do, which was a good thing. I leaned on that pretty heavy, but it's I guess even like in my music, I've always thought of myself as a singer first, and guitar player next. And yeah, I don't know, really, it's just something that kind of developed over just singing in bar. I mean, the volume came from bar gigs for sure, trying to
Right.
scream over the drunks. That was
Yeah,
always my
getting their
thing.
attention,
You
drawing their
know,
attention.
yeah, and but yeah, I guess it's just the more I listened, the more I kind of just soaked up more, and more things kind of creeped their way into how I was singing.
And that was like playing in bars upriver, like Perth
Yeah,
Andover,
totally.
Heartland,
Yeah. Yeah, I would make
Woodstock.
pockets through the week, and then on usually we had a steady gig on Thursday nights, and usually Friday and Saturday I'd have another gig, or at least one night of the weekend. So that was pretty much it. I just I'd work at McCain's through the week and play music on the weekends, and I did that for a year or two, really.
This was out of high school.
Well, I went to university, not university, I guess college in Ontario in London for recording. So I knew I wanted to be involved with music, but again, I didn't assume that music was going to be how I made a living. I just knew I wanted to be involved with it somehow. So took a look at working on the recording side of things, and had to pay off student loans. So tried to sell them vacuum cleaners, and that didn't work. So I came back home and made pizza pockets for probably 2 or 3 years, I think.
Wow.
And it was
Okay.
just kind of as I was playing on the weekends, um, getting busier. I knew I had to quit one of them, and they told me at McCain's that I had to shave my sideburns or wear a beard net. I was like, okay, that's enough of a sign for me. So I gave my 2 weeks notice, and I've been full time since then. With lots of ups and downs, but I've been nothing but a musician since then.
Holy smokes. One thing I do love so much now that I'm back here in New Brunswick is like there's a real love for you in those communities. They really there's a real like I don't want to say ownership because I don't. It's not that. It's something. It's deeper than that, right? It's a real like pride that you're from there. You know what I mean? Did you feel
Yeah,
that? Like, do you still feel that? Because I feel it when I talk to people from upriver. It's just a beautiful thing, like from all the way up. You know what I mean?
yeah. I mean,
Edmonton down.
that's where I first started playing. So I think a lot of people still, I don't want to say local hero, but I mean, yeah, small town kid done good kind of thing, right? And yeah, it's amazing. I feel a lot of close ties to the people at home still for sure. And I don't um, ever take for granted, how hard the folks at home work and how different my life has changed. Going out and play. My dad worked in the woods his whole life, and I'm happy that I did have the experiences I did before I started playing music. To know that there's definitely different ways that people are making a living, and how I can't take for granted what I've got now for sure.
I think that's such an important part, especially of being able to really put your head down and work. It's just that idea of being grateful that this is the job you get to do because you
Yeah,
have a
blows
you
me
have a
away.
really good sense of, as you said, the other jobs.
Yeah.
There's a lot. It's kind of like talking when you talk to Alan Doyle. It's a similar thing. Because I've always, with both of you guys, you both work so hard, and we've talked about this before, is where that work ethic comes from. But when you put it in the context of, well, everybody was around worked really hard at jobs that were harder.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've never worked a hard day on the road. I've had long days for sure, but I wouldn't say they've been hard. They've been hard on the head, or you get really tired, you get beat up from the road. But I've never had to lift 50 pounds over and over again for an 8-hour shift on the road. That's just it's just a different kind of a different kind of tired. But I wouldn't say I have to work hard, but I do work a lot.
Wow, how do you maintain that perspective? How do you maintain that? Like that's what I've always been amazed is more the energy that you maintain through these long, long trips.
Uh, I mean, it's for me. I mean, the real work that you really have to do is the hour and a half you're on stage. You can't compromise anything else that's going out through the day for that hour and a half. Especially now. I mean, when you were playing pubs, if you had a bad night, you could just put your head down and sing Brown Eyed Girl and be all right. But people are showing up to shows now and they're paying anywhere from 30 to 40, $50 for a ticket, and I feel like a pretty massive pile of shit if I don't give them what they came for. And also it's just bad business. If you don't give people what they came for once, they aren't going to come again. So I've kind of always got that in the back of my head that I want to keep doing this, and you don't want to be somebody who people just get bored of, or don't feel like you're interested in. I mean, we talked about people showing up to shows, wanting to have a good show, and me showing up and wanting to have a good show. But I feel like it's musician's job to make that step first. We throw out the first open arm, we throw out the first note. It's like it's on us. How the crowd receives it, that can change from night to night. Sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not. But it's at the very least you've got to give them. You've got to start on the right foot, and I think that's up to the musician. So I always have that in my head when I get out on stage.
And you leave it all on the stage.
Yeah, I mean
You
it's
you leave it all, man. It's quite remarkable.
it's you got to. I mean, and also it's one of those things that when the work is when it doesn't feel like work, when it doesn't feel when the night's going well and it's feeling good and everything's hitting right, it's not a challenge to leave it all on stage.
Yeah.
That just happens. That's just I get more pumped, I get happier. There's when I'm doing a string of nights in a row, I'm kind of conscious of don't throw your throat out too hard. Don't sing too hard. You've got 6 days left before you get a day off. If I have the right night, I don't worry about any of that.
Yeah.
And it's just not to say I hold back, but I just kind of conscious of different things I do with my voice that I can't do all the time, or I wouldn't be able to maintain any kind of a schedule. But when the things are right, you don't think about that kind of stuff. You just sing and let it go, and if you have to catch up the next day, you catch up the next day.
And have you had like I mean you're that is you work your voice.
Mhm.
You work your voice hard. You sing hard at multiple octaves.
Right.
Is there a have you had to kind of get fairly disciplined about that over time?
I travel with a little humidifier. I drink
Yeah.
lots of water. I baby my throat quite a bit. I don't go out to bars after gigs just because shouting all night just doesn't help them
Mhm.
any. Yeah, I baby it that way, and just I am conscious, on stage of what I'm doing, and I can feel when I'm getting fatigued. So I just kind of keep that all in the back of my head. But I don't want to let it dictate a show either. I don't want to go out there and tiptoe around a note. you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, you just let
I'd
him.
rather go
Yep.
for it and maybe not quite get it than not bother with it. And there's little things too you just learn. We've all had to sing through colds, and you learn how to do different things with your voice that make it still like you're working hard, but you've actually kind of taken it easy a little bit. So, yeah, it's definitely something aware of. This last run, we had 12 shows in a row, and by the end of it, I was ready to give
90 minute and you're doing a 90-minute solo
90
set.
minute set. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so by that point, I'm ready to give myself a bit of a break, and I've learned how to set my setup too. I don't do a big song back to back. Do a big song and give them a couple soft ones. It works with the flow of the show, but also it's pretty strategic in maintaining my voice for the night.
Wow. Wow, smart. And having Steve and having a consistent sound. You've had Steve now with you
Absolutely.
for years now.
Yeah, Steve's with me. Oh man, over 10 years for sure. Coal Mining Blues was the first tour he went on, so that was 2011. Um, yeah, having somebody you trust out front and can give you what you want on stage is a big thing. I don't know how guys do it with bands. I mean, if they've got to use in-ears or something like that, I'm not sure how you can maintain singing in front of a band every night. For me, yeah, it's just I guess in solo too. My voice is such a big part of my show. It's voice and guitar.
Yeah.
If you know both of those elements have to be there and doing their job, or it's just kind of falls flat.
Wow. I do love the new record, man. It's cool to hear it solo. Just that, and with some, I will say having Renee and Haley on there is pretty amazing. Having the Smith sisters there, that's such an amazing combination of voices. I love Renee and Haley so much, and they're two of the best singers I've ever heard. And Micah, she sings with you
And
too, right?
Micah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
all
and
three,
Tony
right?
Guns, all
I don't
three.
sing with Micah as much, but I know Micah, and she's incredible, and the three of them are even greater. It's the most incredible thing. And so when I knew you were getting together, I thought this is gonna be massive because you've got a voice that can kind of match the power of theirs, and there's not very many voices that can match at that kind of intensity.
They're amazing. I mean, they're like in the band situation, they're like a horn section.
Yeah.
What they do, and then when it's just the four of us singing, I mean, they almost become their own little backup band. I consider Micah almost like the rhythm section of that band. The third
Yeah.
three voices, just what she holds down, and then Haley and Renee, and it's just amazing how much vibe and power they bring in, and it's just the energy too, right? I mean, it's they're all. I mean, I think even Renee's still 10 years younger than me, and yeah, it's just a great energy on stage.
I know.
You know, I mean, I think I'm rocking out on stage, and I see a video. I'm like, you didn't move for 90 minutes. You stood in the same spot. But of them in the back, and there's just so much energy. And even like, off stage, they just bring this great vibe. So yeah, I'm thrilled that I finally got to kind of connect with them and bring them into what I'm doing. They're just so much fun.
It's such a winning combination to hear them with you. I mean, I love seeing them with Joel, and I feel that same energy when I'm with them on stage. Is that it's just they are so spirited. It's
Yeah.
so filled with spirit, and it is so exciting, and it kind of reminds you of again that power of music. Like when I
Mhm.
hear them sing, I'm like, oh yeah, wait, they're tapped into like the deepest source
Yep.
of musical inspiration. It's right to the deep water. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's
There's no shallowness at all to what's
no,
happening.
no, it's not on the surface by any means with them. And even the vibe for them from sound check to showtime is amazing. Sound check, they're like, oh, we all do, but you really turn it on for show. But when they turn it on, it's like it's a it's a massive switch. They
Yeah,
can
yeah,
they can sing their notes anytime they want, but when they get on stage, it's just their whole body goes into it. And I remember we did one gig with the band and hadn't really played with them that much. We did a couple things in studio, and I looked back over my shoulder, and they had all of these synchronized dance moves they were doing. I was like, I've always wanted that on my stage. I would never ask anybody to do it because I'm not going to do it. So I'm like, I can't ask somebody to do that. But it was just so great, and they just dig in, and they're cheering each other on. They're cheering the rest of the band on.
yeah.
It's not weird for me to hit a note and Haley yell out from the back, and just cheering me on. So it's just such a
Yeah.
great thing. It's what I've wanted
Just
in a band for a long time.
beautiful. It just rises. It's just as you say, like it rises everything, everybody's energy. You
Totally.
know what I mean? It just brings the whole thing up. It's yeah, that's the best, man. And how they communicate with each other about note choice is totally insane. You know what I
How they
mean? When they're
don't
working out
communicate.
parts, they're like
Yes,
it's
we did an album with them in the studio, and I wouldn't take a lot of singers in to sing live off the floor like we did, but with them it was just they just take care of themselves so well. Like there was never anything we had to walk them through. They just I would play the song and say, what are you guys feeling on this, and just let them go with their instinct. So I had a suggestion, throw it out, but it was just yeah, having them in the actual session was amazing. Backup singers like in a recording session live off the floor. It felt so old school and right.
and you've sung with some of the best backup singers in the world. I mean, you did the McCreary sisters. Is that the
Yeah,
McCreary
yeah.
sisters from? Were they from Nashville or
They're
Memphis?
from Nashville. I mean, I feel like the Smiths are just a younger generation of that
Yeah,
same kind of vibe, And the stories are quite similar. Both of their dads were, involved with the church big time. They grew up with that kind of stuff and sang together for years. So, I mean, it's just you can't match it. You couldn't find it. You couldn't create that. I guess it's either there or it isn't what they have.
yeah, yeah. Well, I listened to actually. I'm playing time for the Wicked Rest on the radio show this week, And that David, I don't know, has Francie heard it? David Francie wrote that song. He must have been jazzed when he heard that because that is such a great way to perform that song. First of all, with you solo, and just taking it where you did, key change, and
Mm,
then. But I just love that it's broken down and you hear their backup vote. You can hear your room. You can
right.
hear the interaction. Like you can really tell it's live. And they're back. And when they're kind of doing
Oh
the
yeah.
extra calls and stuff, it's
That tune, I mean, Francie sent me the lyrics and the music, but I didn't know he'd sent the music. I just saw the lyrics, and when I read it, I'm like, well, that feels like a gospel song. And so we recorded it, and it was probably about halfway through the session that I actually found the file that he sent along with it. I was so far off base from what he had in his head. So it was, anyway, so I was a little freaked out to kind of send it to him. I figured, David's an awesome dude, so I didn't think it would be an issue, but he was loving it. Tara Spencer was up there working with him at the time when I sent it to him, so she had a little video of him listening to it, and he was loving it, sending me a great message about it. But it was yeah, it was the first time I've ever taken somebody's just their words and made a song out of it. And
I had no idea. So the music that he had written originally was a different song.
it was more of a Francie Dirge kind of
Yeah.
thing, a little more of leaning on the political side of it. It felt like, driving the words home. Where this one, it just yeah, with the girls, I mean, it just feels like that's what it's supposed to feel like, I guess, to me. And you
Wow.
just nailed it, man.
Francie's amazing. He's
He
such a
is.
special guy.
Yeah, it
He's
was pretty flattering for him to send a song to me specifically. I don't think he's recorded that song. I think it was just something he had around. I was like, I have these ideas. I feel like this is something you could sing. So, and I
really.
get a lot of that, but coming from David, it was kind of like, one of your heroes really saying, "Hey, check out this song I've got if you want to sing it." And yeah, it was so fun to run with that.
Oh man, I bet he is a phenomenal. He's one of the best.
Mhm.
He's one of the best, and I do love running into him. That's really I didn't realize that at all. That's super cool. Who are some of the other folks that you really love? Like when you look at people's careers and artists that are making music now, who are some of the people that really draw you in?
Oh man, so many people around the East Coast that have always kind of been heroes too. I mean, like Minglewood blows me away that he's still writing great songs and singing. I think he's having his 75th this year. I played his 60th birthday bash, and
Wow.
just yeah, and just still has kept so cool. I mean, that guy's gone across the country. He's got a career that, the whole country knows him, and it wasn't through radio hits. It
That's
wasn't
right.
through, he was just a road dog. So I guess I kind of have a connection to him that, and how he built his career for me. He just played a lot. I've played in so many small towns. Like, oh yeah, Mingo would play my high school dance. It's like in these little towns in, Alaska. Like, yeah, Matt would come up here once a year. Blah blah blah. He married his wife up here. Whatever the stories are, kind of thing. And just amazing that that was. He still carried that on for like 50 years. He blows me away. Um, I'm trying to think who I've been listening to. I've been digging back more in back catalogs of, finding old music that I didn't know about more than I have been digging for new
Yeah.
music. Is kind of where my headspace has been. So digging back into Al Green quite a bit, and lots of old Bill Withers, and yeah, I'm trying to think what else. Just one of my favorite things to do is I'll just put something like Al Green on and just let whatever streaming thing I'm listening to just kind of bring up suggestions and just click on things as I go and just find songs that I hadn't heard before and perform.
Yeah. It is actually amazing the wormhole, the algorithmic wormhole
And how
that
much
can be
music I
created.
didn't know was out there.
I
You
know.
feel like you know what's going on, and then realize you have no. I'm on the surface.
It's one of the greatest
Yeah.
things about music, and I've said it for so long, is it's just like the well, it just never dries up. I've spent my whole life collecting records and listening to records and being as engaged as possible. I listen to music all of the time.
Mhm.
And then you'll still discover new stuff over and over and over and over. It's the best.
Yeah, and I love just having stuff just pop up.
Yeah.
Like, they bring up related music, and it's all these artists have maybe had a song or maybe had almost a hit.
Yeah.
Stuff that just would never get played on the stations or anything like that. So be able to have that pop up and then dig into what they did. I mean, I found a guy a few years ago, Paul Pina, who's become like a major influence on me. He wrote Jet Airliner,
Oh wow.
and I think he played for years with Bonnie Raitt. He only did two albums, but they're both just absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's just I just love listening to him.
Wow. I've
And
never heard of him. I'll get into it.
yeah, it's he's great writing, a killer voice. He had a documentary called Genghis Blues, where he went to Tuva, learned to throat singing, was big into that, and just yeah, it's just one of those things that hardly anybody seems to really know about this guy, but they've heard his music. If you listen to Tedeschi Trucks, they've covered a couple of his tunes, and he's just Yeah, he was one of those ones that I just came across. I think it might have been through Jet Airliner. Didn't know if there was a different version,
Yeah.
until probably 10 years ago. And now he's like one of my go-tos, and I'm going to think of like, how do I want to make an album sound? That's where I lean on his kind of stuff.
Oh, that's crazy. Cool, man. I love the Minglewood example too. We recently did something last year and or over the summer, and it was the first time I'd actually hung out with him, and I
Oh
felt
yeah,
I hadn't really hung out with him, and I've always admired him for exactly the same reason. Because I like thinking of careers in the same way. It's like the fan by fan, show by show, rather than just the big jumps. Because I'm not much of a radio person. I haven't been playing on the radio that many times, and you get the bumps every once in a while that are helpful, but then there's the kind of like rubber hits the road is the show.
yeah.
And you meet these guys. He's like, oh, original, and the risk and the sacrifice. Like they would go out for 2 years straight. Remember him telling me that they like bought a house in Glace Bay. They live in Glace Bay, right? I think, or yeah, and for like $18,000, and then they bought a board that they took on the road for $25,000. And they would travel with this huge board, and they would leave for like 2 years.
He was busing transports. Like he was a full-on rock and roll machine, right? Like he was, yeah. I mean, and just his vibe now, I guess, is how humble he still stayed and how much and also an inspiration as far as like he still kept his family a priority through all that.
Mm-hmm.
He never, he's not one of these stories of, things fell apart at home. I'm sure they had some challenges, no doubt, but yeah, I mean, he's still such a good hang, and he's still a champion for anybody who comes along that he's into. He loves putting younger artists up in front of him and pushing them up too. So he's just, I know, he's who we all should be, really. When we hit 75, we should all be Matt Minglewood.
That's exactly how I felt. I was watching him play. I'm like, he sings great. He's singing new songs that are great.
Yep.
And then he's singing the hits. And you're like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like everybody in this room is singing along, and he's 75 and he's sounding exactly as you said. Like this is what we all kind of strive for. It's great to be able to do it for 10 years.
I mean, he's a
But
great
imagine
example
doing it
of
for
that.
50.
He's a great example of that. Every gig, give it.
Yeah, right.
Go out and do it. He's king of that. I've seen his solo show. I've seen him do his band thing, and you never once feel like he didn't give you everything he's given you.
Wow.
You feel like there's nothing left in the tank when he's done. I've doing the like Guthrie songwriter circles with them, and they'll finish with Working Man, and Matt's hitting this high C note that I can't touch, and he's just wailing on it, and he does it every night, and he'd do it every night, whether he had a cold or what. He always pushes it. He's awesome that way.
We're so lucky. We're
Mhm.
so lucky to have artists like that out here on the
Yeah, I
East
feel they
Coast.
really they took a lot of hits for us to make it easier for us. They're the first guys that slugged through bad record deals on the East Coast. They're the first guys that,
Mhm.
like him and Campbell John and and Sam Moon. They fought all the dirty fights so that we don't have to really.
Yeah, right. Interesting. And they built that model of just being like, to admire that over fame.
Hmm.
That model of like, let's go for a 50-year career of working and building it. That's a different look, right? That's a different look, and it's not always the one celebrated by the industry, right? It's like
No, no.
it's the short term kind of big bang is what people are looking for, and I even think about that with your business a lot, right? Is that you know certain metrics wouldn't give you a sense of the size of your career at all,
Yeah.
right? And now we live in a world of metrics. Everything's about metrics, and they're judging the people's career or their value as an artist based on streaming numbers and things that it's one piece. It's one piece. But selling tickets is actually where we have a monetized life. You know what I mean? It's actually where it's just really interesting to see how this is changing.
Yeah, I get asked a lot, when a new album comes, like, how's the new album selling? Is like, I have no idea. There's no way you can actually gauge if people are liking it, if they're getting into it, if they're buying it. But I always look at, like I said, at tickets. If I'm still selling tickets and filling rooms, that means I'm on the right path. That means that people are still with me. And, I think, yeah, for a career like mine, tickets are how you gauge if you're doing well or not.
Yeah.
You know, or if you're losing people, it's just like if you see that build and see the full rooms and the vibes in the room, it's just that's how to know if it's still working. You can't use the metrics like you said. I mean, downloads, or I know, like, we would go to shows, so many people already have my music in their head, but they haven't bought it.
Yeah, right.
Right? They've only streamed it, right? So it's like, you used to go by CD sales. to know if people liked you or not. Because you could do that off stage. It was almost like an instant, like, hey, I liked your show. I'm going to buy your CD. Now
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
liked your show. I'm going to go home and listen to you.
yeah.
So you don't have that number to look at anymore. So it's got to be ticket sales. It's got to be faces. That's what it is now. It's people in the room. That's how you know it.
I mean, you must have got a lot of joy when you were surprising people with the number of people that were showing up to your show. I've always found that, especially as you rocked it into Ontario. You know what I mean? Where it can be nothing against Ontario, I love it, but we're outside of the big cities naturally, and they're talking about certain artists or whatever, and then all of a sudden you could come in and do Massey Hall solo, and everybody's kind of scratching their head, going, what's happening? I mean, that's kind of awesome.
That was still one of my favorite moments was when we did Massey. It was like, a couple kids, we grew up like 2 hours apart from each other. Both of us just wearing guitars, that was it. And, have that place full. To me, that was like, people always, if I feel successful or not, because I don't have radio success. I don't have, any kind of commercial success really. But I mean, like I get to play these rooms and have them full, rooms that, people on the radio are playing. So it's pretty amazing to me. I guess that's the best gauge, if people are coming, that's the way to do it. On this last run, I shook my head a few times. I was playing in Rimouski, and had people showing up to a show. It blows me away that I get to go to these small towns that, I've only been to when I played. I've never been to any other way. So it's pretty great to pull into these small towns like St. George, Quebec, and have a full night. That still blows me away. And just, and some of those towns I hadn't been in for 10 years, but people came back again. And that's just,
It's
to me,
so
that's
beautiful,
success.
man.
That's
It's
the best
so
success.
beautiful. And
Yeah.
it's because you put the work in. I mean, it's not like you weren't, you've been touring, you've been going, and you've been going to those smaller towns, and you would go right into Quebec, and you would do those. And then you, as you said, you leave everything on the floor. I just think it's really important for artists to realize that there's so many different ways to build a career.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And if you're looking at certain metrics, if you're waiting
yeah.
for that big stream song, that might not give you the thing you want. You know what I mean? And there's just so many different ways that it can look.
And definitely, I think people get hung up on there's one idea of success in the music business, and that's Grammys.
Yeah, right.
I'm not counting on me ever winning a Grammy. Not even really concerned about a Juno. It's just, but the last year before we went off the road, I played 220 shows in that year.
Yeah.
Went through the States, went through Europe. I've got a 2 month long tour coming up in Europe this fall. A month coming up in the States. I just did a month in Ontario, a full show. So it's just, I think people get hung up on what other people think success is in the business, and there's just like I said, there's so many ways to have a career that aren't that preconceived idea of what you need to accomplish. And when people accept that, I mean, it's great. I mean, I've got my home and my studio and my truck, and that's all paid
And you
for.
play music for a
Just
living.
playing
And it's a
guitar for a
beautiful
living. I mean, that's success to me. That's amazing.
Yeah, I remember when it hit me, and I think I mentioned this before with another conversation, was when I remember doing that arts and culture tour up in Newfoundland, and they were talking about Buddy, what's his name?
Right.
And the other fellers. And, they would do 12 nights in St. John's at the Arts and Culture Center, and then do 2 weeks in Fort Mac
Right.
to 800 people a night. And you're like, these guys are off the radar to the rest of Canada. They're
Yeah,
not even,
completely.
you know what I mean? Like, some people would not realize the size of their career. But meanwhile, they're playing to 20,000 people over the course of 3 weeks of working. Like, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, nobody else does a residency in Fort Mac. That's pretty amazing, right? So yeah,
And
no, I mean,
that's a big business.
it is, and that's if it's you find where you can fit in and make it work for you. I think that's it's you can. I know you can spend a lot of time fighting against the current and not end up any further downstream. That can be a really frustrating, I think, when you bang your head against that side of the business. It's good to just find a place that does work for you. Let your fans find you. Don't try to make fans, I think, is something that kind of, the last couple albums I've kind of gone that way. Is I'm going to make music that I really want to make and not worry about if people are going to like it, and let the people who do like it find it.
It's awesome. I mean, I think you're really right, too, about not banging your head
Mm-hmm.
against the wall and going, well, why do they get this?
Yeah.
Why aren't I on that list? Why aren't I on that playlist? Why aren't I in those nominees? You can just destroy yourself doing that.
It definitely eats you. I did that for a long time. I'd look at people who I considered like on a parallel with what I was doing. It's like, well, how is he getting this gig? Why is this person on this show? Why is she doing that? And I'm not getting picked. And it's just, and it almost starts to dictate how you create a little bit, or gets in your head when you're making music, and that is the worst thing I think you can do to yourself, is let your end goal be how you create.
Yeah, yeah,
Selling
yeah.
yourself
That's the
short.
that's the golden egg.
Yeah.
That's the golden egg. You got to protect that, no doubt, man, for sure. That's so many of these conversations are about exactly that. How to like protect that little nest egg of creativity, because there's so many different layers of things that can affect your ability to create effectively. If you can open up to the source of your creativity rather than having these things that can really shut it down.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to put it, having it as like it's something you've got to protect and nurture and not let outside influence in. It's almost like you've got to be a contained little ball of creativity and let the outside world not see it till you put it out there, and
Yeah.
not affect it. It's yeah, it took me a long time to get in that headspace, longer than I wish it had, but it's kind of it's so freeing too to go into a studio. The last thing we did with the band in the studio, and just I produced it myself, and just getting up every day and thinking about it, and having fun with music, and just making music we were having fun making, and not putting any pressure on it besides that, not worrying about, oh, is somebody going to dig this, or should we do this, and just picking apart to fit in a hole just doesn't serve anybody. Doesn't serve your fans, doesn't serve you.
And you'll probably quit.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thing. Like the worst thing is that you stop doing it. You know what I mean? Like, and over time, it can really, it can wear you down, and to the point where you have lost this joy. There's no more
Yeah.
joy. You know what I mean? If those things become the dominant narrative of making something, as you said, like the opposite of just, okay, we can go in and have some fun. Like I used to dream of this.
Hmm.
I used to dream of being in a studio with my friends. Let's make that feeling like real again, you know?
And I also think it's important for me anyway to not create something or not do something that I'm not going to want to do every night.
Yeah.
I don't, there's definitely been times I've written songs with people like, I could sing this and put it out and probably would get a bit more attention with it, but I don't want to sing it every night. There's nothing from me in that. I learned that from Ross. We went down to that blues competition in Memphis, and Ross's show was definitely more on the rock and roll side of things than a lot of these, pretty straight up blues dudes were looking for. But Ross's approach was like, well, I'm not going to go and give them a blues show because we don't play blues shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why give them something that I'm not going to do every night that's not me, so I have to fake through it every time I go on stage? And he just went out there and did his show, and the people who dug it, the people who didn't. But at least his headspace was, at least I gave them me. I can say this is honestly me. I didn't have to put anything on, because I guess to me there's no bigger defeat than if you went out putting something fake on and still not being accepted. That would be the worst.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather be not accepted for at least who I am, not who I'm not.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, man. And also, if you're carrying that, if you're faking it and it does work,
Oh,
then it becomes a burden.
yeah.
Then it becomes a burden because it doesn't feel right, right? Like then it's a weight. It's a weight on your shoulders, and you're kind of going, okay, every night, or if that's a relationship to that work, that piece of work, or even that style or whatever, it becomes a burden. And again, like to have a long career, you need to get rid of the burdens, the things
Yeah.
that are kind of like holding you back from being real. That's the only way it becomes tolerable and fun and loose and exciting over a long period of time.
Yeah, it's I guess like when it comes to writing, that's always in my head. There has to be something I can connect to in every song, because I'm going to sing it every night. And if I'm going to, sell it to people, not, in the money sense, but just, make people believe what I'm singing, I've got to believe it. I just that's I never touched a lot of classic blues covers for a long time when I was the blues guy, for that reason. I couldn't sing songs about, being oppressed and working for the man. It's like I've never done that. It's like, so you can't just turn on this, this faux persona and fake feeling and try to sell that to people. That didn't make any sense to me.
Right, right. Wow. So so you got the solo record out, and there's another record in the can?
Yeah, we've had this band album in the can. We didn't know when we are going to be able to tour, so we've just kind of left it on the shelf. But it looks like next year we're actually going to be able to take the band out on the road, which will be amazing. And all the players, they're all fantastic folks from around home, so it's going to be so much fun to take that band on the road. We're in our headspace now. It's like, is it going to be a 2-bus tour? Am I actually taking 2 buses on the road to do
Are
this
you
tour?
doing it?
We're going to. I don't care if I have to do a rock and roll tour, lose my
Yeah,
shirt. It'll be
man.
fun. But yeah, I mean, the album was so much fun to make. We just sat around. We did 4 days at Sonic in the studio and just cranked out tunes. The guys hadn't heard the band or hadn't heard the tunes before we went in. The girls hadn't heard it, so it was just just them reacting and being as fantastic as they were. So it was, I can't wait for people to hear it. I still listen to it. A couple times a month I'll throw it on, just listen to it top to tail, and still love it.
Oh, that would be fun to perform too.
Oh, it'd
That
be
will be
such a
so
blast.
fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time, man. I know you're busy and I hope we
Oh,
get to
this is
see each
great,
other in
man.
person. But this is nice to connect, man. Really, really nice.
Thank you, man. I've been wanting to do this for a while, so thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Good luck with all the rest of the shows.
All right. Thanks, man.
Right on. Take care. Peace.